The first tooth Elena Ruiz found at Calder Tower was still warm. She stood frozen in the dim bathroom light, yellow rubber gloves dripping cloudy water into the sink as she stared at the molar resting beside the drain. Blood clung to its roots. Fresh blood. For several seconds she simply listened. The building answered with silence. 23 floors of dead offices and hollow corridors surrounded her, all of them vacant at this hour except for the occasional groan of old pipes deep inside the walls. Outside the restroom, fluorescent lights buzzed weakly over gray carpets stained by decades of coffee spills and muddy shoes. Elena picked up the tooth with trembling fingers. Human. Definitely human. She wrapped it carefully in paper towel and slipped it into her janitor cart. Then she checked the stalls. Empty. No blood. No signs of anyone entering. The sink beneath the mirror was spotless except for the tooth itself. By morning she had almost convinced herself someone from the daytime demolition crew had left it as a joke. Almost. But when Elena arrived for her next shift, the security guard looked at her strangely the moment she entered the lobby. "You cleaned the 9th floor last night?" he asked. Elena nodded slowly. The guard's expression tightened. "Don't stay up there too long." "That's my job." He rubbed at the stubble on his jaw and looked toward the elevators. "I'm serious." She waited for him to explain. He never did. Instead, he slid the visitor log toward himself and avoided her eyes. That was the first time she noticed his hand shaking. Calder Tower had once belonged to a powerful medical insurance company called Bellwether Mutual. Years ago, the building had supposedly housed hundreds of employees. Now it waited for demolition. Most of the offices were empty except for abandoned furniture, outdated computers, and mountains of forgotten paperwork left behind after Bellwether collapsed under federal investigation. Elena never cared much about the details. She preferred empty buildings. Empty buildings asked nothing from her. She worked nights because night shifts allowed her to disappear. No conversations, no forced smiles, no reminders of the world outside. During the day, she rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat where she slept beside a fan that rattled all summer long. She spoke to almost nobody. Sometimes cashiers startled when she answered questions because they assumed she was mute. People stopped seeing women like Elena after a certain age. She didn't mind. Being unseen hurt less. Years earlier, before the divorce and before her son vanished, silence had terrified her. Now, silence felt safer than memory. At 12:43 a.m., Elena wheeled her cart into floor 9. The elevator doors opened with a metallic groan. Cold air drifted from the hallway. Immediately, something felt wrong. The floor smelled freshly cleaned. Not old clean. New clean. Bleach. Strong enough to sting her nose. But Elena hadn't cleaned floor 9 since Tuesday. She frowned and pushed the cart forward. The lights flickered overhead. Rows of abandoned cubicles stretched into darkness. Computer monitors sat draped beneath dusty plastic sheets like corpses under fabric. The silence here felt heavier than the rest of the building. As Elena passed conference room B, she slowed. She was certain she had left the chairs stacked on top of the table 2 nights ago. Now they stood arranged neatly around the room, as if waiting for a meeting. Elena stared through the glass. One chair slowly rotated toward her. She stopped breathing. The movement was subtle, tiny, but unmistakable. She stepped back instinctively. The chair stopped moving. A cold pressure crawled up the back of her neck. "Helena." The whisper came from somewhere behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Only the buzzing lights. Then, a vacuum cleaner, far down the hallway, running. Elena stood motionless. The sound continued for several seconds before abruptly stopping. No footsteps followed. No movement. Nothing. The floor became silent again. By the 3rd week, Elena stopped telling herself the building was normal. Things kept changing. Trash bags she removed returned to their bins the next night. Phones rang despite disconnected power. Office doors opened after she locked them. And every night, someone wrote the same message on the maintenance whiteboard near the elevators. Don't clean 9B. She erased it repeatedly. It always returned, sometimes written larger, sometimes shakier. Once, written in something brownish red. Elena stopped using that marker afterward. Sleep became difficult. She woke at strange hours, smelling bleach in her apartment, her dreams filled with endless corridors and wet footprints leading into darkness. Sometimes she heard her son speaking from another room. "Mom?" The voice sounded exactly as he had been at 14. One night she woke standing barefoot in her kitchen holding a bottle of industrial cleaner from Calder Tower. She didn't remember bringing it home. Another time she found deep chemical burns across her hands after dreaming she had scrubbed something for hours. The strangest part was the stain. Hallway 9B. A dark reddish smear stretched across the carpet outside a sealed office near the far end of floor 9. No matter how hard Elena scrubbed, it always returned. Night after night. The same shape, the same size, like blood rising through the fibers. She attacked it obsessively. Brush, bleach, steam cleaner. Nothing worked, and each night the stain seemed darker. One evening, the security guard stopped her before her shift. "You ever hear of Bellwether's investigations?" Elena shook her head. The guard leaned closer. "People disappeared here." She said nothing. "There were rumors, illegal testing, undocumented patients, basement clinics." He swallowed hard. "Some employees testified before the company shut down." "Why are you telling me this?" The guard looked toward the elevators. "Because you're staying too long." "What does that mean?" "You wander off after your shift ends." Elena frowned. "No, I don't." Yes, you do." He stared at her carefully. "Sometimes until sunrise." A chill spread through her stomach. "That's impossible." The guard hesitated. Then he quietly said, "You talk to people upstairs." Elena began checking the security office herself. Most of the cameras no longer worked, but floor 9 still had partial coverage. The footage made her skin crawl. At 3:12 a.m. she appeared on screen outside office 9B, standing completely still, for 47 minutes. Not moving, not cleaning, just staring at the wall. Then the footage glitched violently. Static swallowed the image. When the picture returned, Elena was gone, the hallway empty. At 4:03 a.m. she reappeared, pushing her cart in the opposite direction, smiling. Elena shut off the monitor immediately. She didn't remember smiling. The next night she finally forced open office 9B. The room inside was almost empty. Dust covered the desks. Old medical files littered the floor. Most were ruined by water damage. But one folder remained dry. Inside were patient intake forms. No names, only numbers. Several pages contained handwritten notes. Subject shows memory fragmentation. Continued exposure recommended. Disassociative response successful. Elena's hands trembled. Then she found a photograph paperclipped to the back. A young man in medical scrubs standing beside two Bellwether executives, his face partially obscured, but Elena recognized him instantly. Gabriel, her son, older than when he disappeared. Alive. The room tilted around her. She stumbled backward into the hallway. Her breathing became ragged. That was impossible. Gabriel vanished 17 years ago. Police searches, posters, interviews. Nothing. No body, no answers. And now... A sound echoed behind her. Scrubbing. Slow, rhythmic scrubbing. Elena turned. At the far end of the hallway, a woman in janitor coveralls mopped the floor beneath flickering lights. Her back faced Elena. Long, dark hair, thin frame. The woman paused, then slowly looked over her shoulder. Elena nearly screamed. The woman had Elena's face. Older, rotting, smiling. The lights instantly went out. Darkness swallowed the corridor. When emergency lights flickered on moments later, the hallway was empty. But Elena noticed something else. A narrow maintenance door beside 9B stood slightly open. She had never seen it before. Behind it, a cramped passage stretched between the walls. Inside, she discovered blankets, food wrappers, bottles of water, a portable radio, a mattress. Elena stared numbly. Someone had been living here. Then realization struck her like ice water. Not someone. Her. Scattered throughout the hidden room were her belongings, her medications, her shoes, family photographs. Elena backed away in horror. No. She still had an apartment, didn't she? Her breathing quickened. Images flashed through her mind. Sleeping behind the walls, washing herself in employee bathrooms, sneaking through maintenance corridors after midnight, dumpster diving for food. Memory after memory tore loose violently all at once. Elena collapsed to her knees. She had lost the apartment months ago, maybe longer. She'd buried the truth. Calder Tower had become her entire world. But the worst revelation came later. Far beneath the basement, Elena discovered another hidden level behind a freight elevator, requiring an old bellwether access card she found inside office 9B, sublevel C. The elevator descended far longer than it should have. When the doors opened, freezing air spilled inside. Hospital beds lined the underground corridors. Rust covered metal restraints attached to walls. Children's drawings peeled from bulletin boards. Most horrifying of all, the place looked clean, perfectly clean. The smell of bleach overwhelmed everything. Someone maintained this place constantly. Lights buzzed softly overhead. Elena wandered deeper underground. Then she heard voices. A man speaking quietly, another person crying. She followed the sounds toward a large steel door marked Archive. Inside were thousands of records, photos, medical reports, videotapes. Bellwether had experimented on vulnerable patients for years, using psychological conditioning and chemical manipulation to fracture memory and suppress trauma. Elena found Gabriel's employee file. Then she found her own. Subject, Elena Ruiz. Status, family liability. Observation notes. Subject shows extreme denial response following disclosure event. Elena's knees nearly gave out. Disclosure event. A memory suddenly surfaced with horrifying clarity. Gabriel sitting across from her 17 years ago, crying, confessing. He had worked for Bellwether. He had helped destroy the evidence after patients died during illegal trials. When investigators closed in, Bellwether prepared scapegoats. Gabriel planned to disappear before arrests began. Elena remembered screaming at him, remembered calling him a monster, remembered him leaving forever. Not kidnapped, not murdered, gone by choice. And somewhere along the way, Elena's mind shattered under the weight of it. She invented mysteries because the truth was unbearable. Her son was never the victim. He was part of the horror. A sudden scraping sound echoed behind her. Elena turned slowly. A man sat alone in the corner of the archive room beneath a dim fluorescent light. Older now, gray at the temples, wearing janitor coveralls, calmly scrubbing blood from the floor with a wire brush. Gabriel. He looked up at her quietly. No shock, no fear, as though he'd been expecting her all along. Elena couldn't speak. Gabriel dipped the brush back into the cloudy bleach water. Then he said softly, "You missed a spot." The fluorescent lights went out, and somewhere in the darkness beneath Calder Tower, a vacuum cleaner started running again.